We are live. Fabulous. So, what are we talking about today? So, you all signed up for a session on PPC personalization, but I do have a very slight confession for you. That actually, whilst we're talking about what we can do with PPC, all of the elements that we talk about today actually comes down to traffic source personalization. So, be that an ad source, or actually even just from your email marketing campaigns or your social media campaigns, directly from your account as much as the ad side of it. So there's lots we can talk about here. Obviously, we're primarily talking about sort of the PPC and the ad side of it, but I just wanted to get you thinking that this can be otherwise applied. So how does this work? What is Fresh Relevance actually going to do? That feels like a good place to start. Then we can look at some things you could do with this tool, and then we can talk about how you get started and if there's any other ideas you want to discuss. So in Fresh Relevance, we can essentially segment customers based on the first page URL that they visit. So when they land on your site, regardless of what means that is, what is the actual URL that they land on? And we can dissect that URL, we can pull out variables, and then you can target people based on that. What does it look like in the system? Well, we're going to have a lot more of a look later, but it is a nice and simple slot rule. Even though we're talking about URL structures, there's some nice selectors there. So what's a URL? Now, Oxford Dictionary gave me a really basic explanation there. It's address of a web page, but what I actually wanted to talk about was the components within a URL. So here I've just got a URL. This is one that we use to see who's coming to the Fresh Focus sign up page from one of our workshops, which is a sort of campaign that we're tracking. So you can see here that this might be a typical link that you would see for your inbound campaigns. This comes with the protocol, which is the bit right at the beginning, domain, which is going to be sort of your website. So with that www.com. Although we can target these, you're probably not going to, so you can forget that we've spoken about those. And the important bits is the path. So that's anything that's going to come after a slash in the URL. So if you look at the address bar of this meeting, for example, we can see meet.google.com/ and then it's got some letters that is the meeting ID. So that's the path there. And then the most important and the most exciting bit for us to talk about today is this query. So that question I asked, who knows what a URL query is? You're going to be able to answer that one now. So this is the part at the end of the URL, and it lets you pass additional information in. As I mentioned, in Fresh Relevance, you can target any of these and you can do sort of all sorts of operators. So is the path equal to fresh-focused, or does it start with fresh? Does it end with focus? Does it contain a hyphen? You can do lots of different operators. So if we look at a query, there's a long definition there, but essentially what's important is that these are parameters. So they have an element and then a value, and they define specific actions. So like we saw before, that UTM campaign. So I've just got that URL again. You might see that there's an extra query on the end because it didn't fit on my last slide. But how will you identify a query? So these always start with a question mark. So again, if you look at your meeting link, you've got the question mark before auth user there. That is the query at the end of the URL. We then have them working as parameter equals value. And then you can stack them by using an ampersand. So that groovy and sign lets you stack multiple. So we actually have 3 queries in here. We've got the UTM campaign equals CS workshop, UTM campaign underscore medium equals documentation, and UTM underscore source equals deck. Is everyone with me so far? Fabulous. So just to confirm, when we're talking about this parameter and value, we have the parameter, which here is UTM underscore campaign, and then it's equal to the value. So what we can start to do is target particular queries within that URL they use to get to your website and evaluate the value for it. So we can say if UTM campaign equals CS workshop, show this content, otherwise show that content. So the final bit before we can actually go and talk about why we'd use it is what can you do here? So we've talked about queries, but what are they? Where do they come from? You can actually put anything on a query. I actually use this a lot in Fresh Relevance to test web content because I can put a query on the end of a URL that says if test equals yes, and then I can preview content. But more realistically, there's probably three core variables you're already using, which is your Google Analytics campaign tracking. So those UTM variables we just spoke about. I would imagine they're on most of your links already, and those are things we could start to pick up from already. But for those using Google Ads or that want to do something more fancy within Google Analytics, there's a lot of advanced fields that you can add on. They're called value track parameters, and there's a link in here to the Google documentation that has a full list of what's in there. But the things that I find really interesting are that you can pass through search keywords. So the actual phrase that's typed into Google could be passed through for us to target on, which is super powerful. We also can use ad groups. So the whole way that you have set up your Google Ads functionality, you can then mirror that into Fresh Relevance. And then merchant IDs as well. So if you're selling through any sort of affiliates, perhaps if you've got different margins if you've got different costs for different groups as well, these are some ways that you can make sure that you are personalizing to those core groups. Any questions at this point? Nope, I'll take silence as golden. So what can we do? This is the exciting bit. I just wanted to get some preamble out the way so you know where we're coming from. But here I've got probably my 6 most favorite ideas of why you might want to target people and what you might want to show them as a result. But this is 6 ideas of about 6 million. So the first 2 ideas really come down to what I like to call continuing that experience. So if someone has clicked through, for example, I'm on a Instagram campaign for Shred September, and I'm getting ads from our lovely demo ski store. And I click through on that advertisement. Well, you already know that I'm interested in that event. So what can you start showing me? I've just got a simple example here saying, are you ready for hashtag Shred September? That's bringing it in. But actually what you're probably going to be looking at doing is, if you're advertising a category, then making sure your recommendations on your homepage align to that, or making sure that generally your content on whatever it is that interested that customer in that campaign to click through to your website is then the messaging that you continue, because that's what's brought them to the website, and that's in theory what they're most likely to convert from. The second one, and definitely my most favorite, is that personalizing on initial search terms. And I'm going to bring out my little black dress example. So yeah, I'm generally a sucker for a black dress. So I'll go to Google, I'll type in black dress. I'll then go to Google Ads and scroll through and see what's in there. Well, if I click through on a product and perhaps when I look at the page, it's not the one that I want, you're then showing me similar products on that page, but they might not be black dresses, whereas actually why I've come to your site, what I'm actually searching for and what I want to achieve. So then you could recommend to me items based on that initial search term rather than on what I'm engaging with or my recent history. Another example there could be that you're maybe buying a complementary product. You're not going to want something different think Hurry, our head of customer, was talking the other day about not having a white bag, and she couldn't go out with a black bag. So, you know, especially when we're talking about fashion retailing, colours and things like that have a massive impact. I think it can apply in sort of lots of different ways. The only thing to consider here is how many keywords do you have and how you're going to prioritize those, because if you are creating a custom experience for every search term, you could quite quickly be building a lot of content with quite little traffic. Anything you wanted to add, Will? No. Fab. So the next set of ideas is to consider that context someone's from. So we know how someone got to the site. We know what headspace they were in at the time. We know what their journey is better than any other route to your site. So how can we use that to then make sure that customers are getting the best experience? So one that I think is coming particularly important, particularly with the growth of sort of Google Shopping and things like that, is customers aren't hitting home pages anymore. People are going directly to list pages. People are landing directly on product pages more often than not. Typically, websites I'd say have been built where, you know, that web page is like the front door to the house, and that's going to show all of that crucial messaging and everything that you need a customer to know about you and your brand. But that gets missed if someone does land directly on another page of your site. So little things like, I mean, this is a very small banner, but, you know, promoting here Trustpilot. It could be that actually if you've got a sale ongoing that you want to carry that over. Or if it's free delivery, things like that. So any messaging that you think someone missed because of their journey and their context coming to the site, you could retarget them based on that landing page. This one's very general, but we can show, repress, or personalize content either based on whether they're just from an ad source or particularly the campaign. So I think discounts are a nice one to talk about here because it's quite an obvious example. But, you know, do you want to be giving discounts to your ad traffic? If you've already paid to get them to the site, are you going to give them offers, or are you going to repress them? Or is there different levels of discount that you might want to give people based on where they've come from? Do you want to make sure that you do get a conversion from those people? The other thing to think about in terms of, we've talked about offers, but actually I think email capture as well is a really important one to consider here. So again, you've paid for that traffic to come to your site. Well, if they just bounce out, then that sort of payment was for nothing. Whereas if you can at least get an email address to join them to the list, then is that at least some value you're getting from that traffic? So maybe you have a more aggressive email collection campaign for PPC traffic than you would for organic customers, for example. And then the final two ideas really come down to those bounce rates. And I am so guilty of this, so I can talk about it very easily. But I will use Google Shopping. I'll click into a website to look at a product. If that's not the one, I'll click the back button on sort of my browser. And actually, I've not explored what that particular brand has on offer. So how can we show someone? So we could show alternatives. This example here is in a popover when someone's leaving the website. So how can we make sure that they've seen a breadth of products? Yes, the one on the page might not be for them, but what alternatives might there be that you can keep them in the site? In a similar vein, something that actually I've had quite a few clients look into and implement is directing people back to category pages rather than even showing products, and showing maybe discounts or advertising a discount within a particular category as well. This tends to come, I think it's another problem with people landing directly on product pages where navigation doesn't go backwards very well on websites, or at least not on all websites. Yes, we might have breadcrumbs, so you can see the breadcrumbs up here. So I could go back to tops here, but that's quite a little part of my screen. There's no sort of real big, hey, come back and see what other tops we have at the category level. So even just a popover, just with a nice simple CTA that will then take someone back to the category page. We actually had someone implement this recently, and their ROI went up hugely just by putting one little barrier in place to someone leaving the website. So it was really interesting to see that that had such an effect. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I've got one actually. Just with regards to those pop-ups there, do you have any stats on like impact on bounce rate?
So we unfortunately don't, because bounce rates are only measured in Google Analytics. So I'm trying to get a case study for one of them at the moment. Let me chase that up to see if we can get that.
Yeah, I mean, but the whole thing around ROI sounds really good as well. So yeah, it'd just be really kind of interesting to know what the impact was there as well, especially like on channels that are like paid channels, you know, where people are coming in, you know, from Google Shopping or search or whatever. So yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll take that one offline and I'll send it over to you when we've got it, Alan. It's not close, so I'll see if I can get you something in the
No
interim.
worries. Thank you.
If not, I'd be more than happy to work with you on it and get some stats.
Yeah. Cool.
Lovely. So what I'd like to do before we do hop into sort of demo and building stuff out is just get a feel for which of these 6 ideas are tickling people's fancy the most. So I'm going to ask you to use that hand up again. So maybe if people could sort of think about up to the top 3 that they liked, and I'll just take some quick numbers in terms of which one people are voting for, and then when we go through the platform, we can talk through that example. So the first one is continuing the campaign targeting past that first landing page. So if someone's clicked from a certain campaign, continuing. I don't think I've got everyone on screen. It's not a very good voting system. There we go. Fab. The next one is personalizing on those initial search terms. Then critical messaging for skipping the homepage. Sharing or repressing or personalizing offers or maybe data captures. And then popovers for bounces. These are built in the same way, so you can vote for these as a pair. Fab. So our winners are, firstly, showing or repressing or personalizing content, and then these bounce rate popovers. So we'll focus on those as we hop through and go into our demo. All right, bear with me one moment. Yeah, there we go. It's coming through. So for anyone who is new to our Fresh Focus, you get to live in the world of ski and snowboards with our demo store. So when we start talking about that, obviously, do feel free to apply it to your own brands and your own products and categories. But hopefully that gives you a bit of context. Because we've got a few new people on, I'm just going to do a little bit of signposting. So you'll see lots of question marks around the platform, particularly at the top of your screen. And this has links to our help documentation. We also have the video icon. They're going to bring up videos that are anything from overview videos to walkthroughs to implementing specific tactics. What I love about these is that these change as you move around the site. So wherever you are, you can click on these and it's only going to be relevant information. We also have our tactics library. So obviously today we're talking about PPC traffic and how we can personalize to that. There is a document going in our tactics library shortly that's going to show you how to do that. So it's all about step-by-step image-based documentation. Click here, think about this. This is best practice. And it's just going to guide you through any setups. The tactics library is really nice as well because it's based on different marketing goals rather than focusing on fresh relevance components. So you should be able to find something nice and easily that resonates with the current goal in there. So we are going to talk about our golden marketing rule. So this sits in slots. So if we just take a moment to talk about the journey of building content in Fresh Relevance, you would start by creating your content as smart blocks. So if we want to show a data capture, if we want to show an offer, if we want to show recommendations, you're going to build out what it is that you want to show in certain scenarios. Once you've got those built, you'd probably click the publish and use button, and then that would go through the slot creation process. And that's where we're going to do this personalization today. I'm just going to skip into slots just so that we don't have to quickly make some content. So I'll make one this way, but you might not have encountered this before. I'm actually going, no, we'll create a new slot. So once we have our slot created, you'll see the various options as normal. One thing worth noting is this is only going to be applicable to website content. This wouldn't work in email because there's not been a first page that has been visited to then sort of base the personalization off. So it is web only. And we're going to use this current session category. So for anyone who's not familiar with the idea of a session, think about it as like a visit to a website. So a session is made up by lots of different interactions with you looking at different pages, maybe taking different actions, and that all happens within a session, and then that will get closed off when you are inactive on the website for a certain period of time. So by using these current session rules, we can look more than just the current page they're on, but what else have we seen them do? And it's this first page visited, which we are using to identify the traffic. So once I have pulled the rule into our tree, we've got our standard yes and no pathways, and we're going to start to configure this rule. Firstly, we can pick those different parts we were talking about or the full URL. If you're not sure which is which, there's a lovely little selector that kind of just does it for you. So you can just click on the bit that you want to copy and it's nice and easy. If we wanted to target on a page path, for example, so for people who land directly on a list page, that's where you can use this. But let's look at those campaigns in terms of a query. So if we remember, we mentioned that the queries have a parameter and a value. So in this example here, ID is a parameter and the value is 3, or we have name as the parameter and page as the value. So the first thing we're identifying is which parameter we want to pick up. So let's say for our sort of showing or repressing offers that we just want to identify anyone on a PPC campaign. So it might be that you can identify from a UTM campaign. Maybe your source is going to be the best way to figure it out. But essentially, you're looking for whatever is consistent across all of your PPC traffic in terms of URL. It could be something like, we'll use the UTM source, for example. So let's say all of your Instagram clicks are all paid traffic. So we could say if UTM source is, and then we need to say what type of data it is. Essentially, this is so that with things like numbers, you can do bigger than and less than. Most of the time, you're probably going to be using text. And then you have a comparison. So it could be simply that this exists. So any URL that hits your site and UTM sources on that URL as a query, regardless of what it is, then you could identify those. That's probably going to pick up all of your marketing links though. So that's probably not what we want to be doing in this case. But we might have something like is equal to, and then we might have Instagram. If you wanted to target your newsletters, for example, but maybe you have newsletter May 22, newsletter June 22, newsletter July, maybe we would do something like starts with newsletter. So this can be nice and flexible here based on what your URLs look like and how they're working. And this is where I guess the PPC and the traffic source can get a little bit tricky, is that what you need to be doing is mirroring what you've got set up elsewhere, so either in your campaigns or your ad platforms, and then mirroring that into Fresh. Obviously, lots of examples here today, but if there is anything in terms of your variables you want to check over, then do feel free to reach out. So it might be that actually that gets us what we need to. Does anyone have any sort of example links that they use that they'd like to see built here? No, it's funny people can't just recall random long URLs. That's a bit of a silly question. So this is where we're starting to build out these rules. It might be that there's actually other elements you want to build on top of this as well. So it could be if I put, so I've seen most commonly particular campaigns being targeted. So campaign 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then showing relevant content there. You can stack these rules as well. So if I go to current session, I can pull it in and make a group that's maybe an and or an or. So I could say, for example, that the campaign must start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the UTM source. The UTM source must be equal to Instagram. And we can start to build those up. And you can also use an any rule, so an or. So if someone's coming from a campaign starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or from the source of Instagram, we'd show content. So you can start to layer these up. Whilst we're looking at rules, there are a few more that I'll probably just draw your attention to, because I think they sit really nicely along what we're talking about today. So one of them is has browsed in the current session. So we've obviously talked about that first page. So where do they start that session? But then what do they do within it? And you can start to build out whether they've browsed products. So for example, you might find someone from a PPC campaign that has not browsed anything. So they haven't browsed a product, they've just interacted with other content. Maybe you want to treat those differently because they've not really explored your brand. You could also use the number of pages that they've viewed in that session. So viewed page count. So perhaps for your direct traffic, you will show a popover after they've viewed 5 pages. Whereas for your PPC traffic, perhaps if they've viewed 2 pages, that's when you want to ask for their email address. So you can use that sort of, that more almost aggressive email capture early on. And then finally, these are my favorite rules generally, is the person history. So what has someone been browsing? And you can start looking at the number of products they have browsed, or even particular products or categories of products as well. So you could then start to layer this. So if PPC traffic have been looking at category X, then let's maybe show a popover with complementary categories if they're going to bounce off a website. So there's, oh, and then, yeah, the final one that I would talk about is your session count rule. So we spoke about the session being the whole journey, but how many of those journeys have they had in a period of time? If someone's had more than one session and they came through a PPC link, then they've already engaged with your brand, and you kind of have hoped that they'd be organically finding your site after being paid already to get there. So are those the sort of customers where you want to be even more aggressive in terms of getting that email address? Or if someone is clicking on ads and having multiple sessions, is it time to give them an offer just to get them over the line so you're not constantly paying for them to browse? So there's a few different things, and it really comes down to what you really want to achieve from contacting this PPC traffic. So in terms of sort of showing and repressing offers, which was our first one, that's nice and easy. So let's pretend this is the rule that's identifying our traffic. We could simply add a smart block. So these are recommendations I want to show to the PPC guys, and then no content to everyone else. Otherwise, if I pull no content out, we could be showing block, I don't know why these have got numbers on, but we can start showing those different pieces of content to different customers. And you can start stacking these as well. So if campaign is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, show this. If it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, show that. And that actually brings me on really nicely to my final slide, and then we'll pop out and look at the popover abandonments. There's my presentation. So the last thing that I really wanted to sort of talk about content-wise is, where do you start? As normal in Fresh Relevance, you can achieve everything from walking your dog to cleaning the sink, and some marketing tactics along the way there. So how do you know where to start? How do you make sure that you're using your time most wisely, I guess, more than anything, because this can be a huge area. So my first bit of advice is to ask yourself why. So why is it that you want to be targeting these people, and why do you want to personalize to them? So you've got sort of addressing your challenges, which I think is probably what I would start with. So is there high levels of bounce rates? Are you paying a lot for your spend and not getting that ROI from the people that are coming through to your website? And that's where that maximizing ROI comes in as well. So in terms of prioritization, where are you spending the most and gaining the least? Because that's where I would start, because that's where you stand to gain the most. The next thing to think about is who. So firstly, starting to think about those campaigns you've got running and that first page rule. So which parts of the query can you use to identify the who? And then I'd look in terms of volumes, whether that's search volumes in terms of paid for ad, or whether it's just campaign, like email send volumes, for example, for if you want to retarget people based on any newsletter campaigns, and similar with any social media campaigns. So who are you targeting and how are you going to identify them based on those parameters or paths? Where and when. So we know who we're going to target and we know what we want to get, but when is the best place to do it? So that's thinking about that wider journey we talked about. How are people getting to your site in a sort of a larger sense? So are they searching in Google and getting there? And then how can you make sure that you make that journey as seamless as possible based on what we know they came from? And also the touch point of the website. So is it popovers? Is it in-page content? Is it on the landing page, or is it not till you get to the cart, for example? So where is, again, that challenge? Where are you seeing that the most? Or where in that journey would be the best time to intervene? And then finally, it's the actual what. So what are you going to show differently to those customers? So the black dress example, it's showing other black dresses, and that's based on that search term. It's not based on anything else that you might use for other more organic traffic. The messaging as well might be something that you want to change up a little bit. Or even the sort of layout of the page is also all sorts of stuff we can do in Fresh Relevance in terms of what we actually show differently. So those, I'd say, are your 4 pillars. If you can define what those are, then implementing it is really, really easy. I'd say 60% of the work is going to be here, and it's figuring out what is it that you want to do, where are you going to have that most impact, and then just designing it and putting it live. Is there any questions at this point?
Daisy, one quick question for me. So all of this stuff, would this, what modules would all of this require? Would it just be the web module, or?
Yep, it's just the website personalization. Obviously, other modules can go in tandem with it. So, for example, if it's rating and reviews that you want to show to people, you would need the social proof module. But for the majority of what we spoke about today, then the web module is going to get you everything you need.
Great, thanks.
No problem. Does anyone have any ideas of things that they'd like to do, but they're not quite sure how they'd go about it? Nope. Okay, well then in that case, let's hop back to the system and we can maybe build out an abandonment popover. So I'm actually going to, we'll look at the example, just get the slide deck back. So we will build out this one on the left here. So a nice popover with products within it. So firstly, we're going to create our popover recommendations. So I'll go to content and smart blocks. And then from here, I will click on the type of content that I want to show. So we mentioned about those data captures, the email capture. Banners are really great in terms of sharing that information. Coupons we also spoke about. So if I go to recommendations, click create smart block, I'm gonna take this opportunity to quickly show you the new version. So our new version of our smart block builder, if you've not seen it before, it is so much nicer to work with. We have a feedback form at the top here that our head of product management sits on sits on the Slack channel waiting for this to fire off to see what people think. So please do provide any information if you do use it. So as I go through this flow, I'm going to be asked some questions, and this is going to do some of the heavy lifting for me. So I want to pop this on the website. I'm going to pop it on a product detail page, so on the actual product pages, because I'm going to do this for if people are coming through and landing directly on a product page, then I want that to fire. I then get some tactics that I can pick from, and we actually have this as a tactic. So similar products to on page, this uses our AI mechanisms to essentially look at the product on the page in question and then run through an algorithm to essentially decide what other products are most similar. So this works on things like the name of the product, the description, any categorization that you have against them, amongst some other things. So that's one we're going to use. I then have some templates to choose from. So it's the popover that we want to use in this case. So I'm going to click into the popover. I'm going to call this PPC popover X. Very creative. And click save. We're then in our editor, and I won't spend too long in here because there's a lot of things we could talk about, but we've got our preview on the side here. We have on the left all of our different styling. So I think there's, gosh, 120 plus options in here to be able to really make this on brand. It looks a bit odd because I'm so zoomed in so that you can see on my giant monitor rather than it being oversized. So at this point, I would configure the look and feel. I would get it on brand. I mentioned that we've done some of the heavy lifting here. So all of the data sources are exactly what I need there. It's also automatically popped filtering on for me. So if you are working in multiple currencies, languages, site brands, then that is automatically going to be built for you, which wasn't the case before. We're also automatically going to make sure that we don't recommend the product on the page. By default, our system won't know unless you tell it to remove that product. So again, it's just a small optimization that's in there by default. I'm getting slightly off topic, but I'm going to quickly show you my favorite feature of the new flow, which is that you can preview content in mobile. This is something that, I mean, you know, everything should be mobile first now. Every time I speak to customers, the wide majority is mobile rather than desktop. So this is one of, I think, yeah, this is very overdue, but very much welcomed in the platform. And it's the same with site editor as well when we get there. So at this point, let's pretend that I'm happy with the branding. It's got all of the messaging that I want on it. Unfortunately, my demo store is not quite playing ball with that image right now. But at this point, we would go to save and use. And this is where I can then say a website slot is where I want to put it. Yes, we are going to put it on the site editor eventually, but we need to put it in a slot first so that we can add those rules that we looked at. If you do click the wrong option, it can be changed after the fact. So there's no worry there. So I'm going to just use that slot that we already made, but I could click create new and give it a name. But instead, I'm going to just use what we've already done. So we've made our content. So now we need to, by default, that content does pop over on exit. But of course, that might be something you want to look at as well. So from here, we're going to create those rules like before. So in terms of how might we identify these people that have directly gone to a product page. So you could use things like first page visited and say it's not the home page and it's not a list page. That could be one way of doing it. Or what I would probably do is use this viewed page count to say if they have only looked at one page in the session and they are currently on a page type which is a product browse page, then we know that they came to the website directly to a product page. So for me, I think that's when I would use this tactic rather than specifically just for ad traffic. But of course, if you do want it to be specific to ad traffic, then we can add in that first page visited rule as well. So next we're going to put in our smart block. So if I just search for PPC, so if yes, they've viewed one page and that is a product browse page, we're going to show the popover recommendations. Otherwise, we're going to show no content. And we can click save. So we've set up our content, we've set up our targeting, we just need to deploy it now. So I'm going to go to the Use tab and then click through to the site editor. Oh, hang on, I'll go this way, site editor. And then you're going to deploy this as you normally would to the site editor. So in this case, I would go to a product page. So I've got here's one I made earlier. Example. So I'm just going to navigate to a product page because this is where this popover is going to come up. I didn't want it on a listing page, certainly don't want it on my home page. It's only going to work on the product pages. It's also only going to work on the product pages because we need to pass in the ID of the product on screen so it can decide what is similar. So then I'm going to drag it into the screen. I'm going to put it in an element that is on all of my product pages because this means that I don't have to go through every page to deploy it. I can simply drag it in here. I'm then going to hop down to this advanced and I'm going to pick the option. So page type, it's actually already put it on product detail pages for me. But if it might be that it comes up with this page only, and then you can say, actually, I want it to be on all pages of this type. Then I click publish, and then that would be it live for you. So yeah, obviously we didn't do the styling, but otherwise you in theory could get something out pretty quickly on this, which is where I mentioned that the heavy lifting is in considering what you want to do and prioritizing where you're going to get the biggest uplift. Any final questions as we're coming to a close on our session?
I've got the question. So do we need any development of the website, or everything, actually all the modules that you can do within your website, and just is it the matter of copy and pasting the code to our own website, or how does it work?
Yeah, so there's two deployment options available. So if I go back to a slot, it will show you. So one being the site editor we looked at. So that's just an iframe of your website that we can drag and drop in content, and then our script will load it out for you. The other option is that you can put it through a developer resource. So if I go to the Use tab, you'll see the code that you need to insert. So you can see those here, and you could put that code in your website. One thing I would just caveat here is that you see anywhere where there's a value goes here, you're going to need to make sure you're dynamically populating those. Our site editor will do that automatically. But if you're going to manually place that code, then you'll need to put some sort of dynamic variable in so that we know what the product is that we're finding similar items to, what site brand it should be for, what currency we should be showing the product in, what language of the product. So it's a little bit more complex to do it by a developer, but it is possible.
Okay, thank you.
For anyone as well that's maybe had a love-hate relationship with the site editor in the past, we are working on a new version that should be, I'm waiting for it to be in beta next week, actually, so very exciting. So yeah, you'll see some movement in that area soon that should make that deployment a lot easier, moving more to an overlay on your website rather than loading yours in, so it eradicates some of the hurdles we've perhaps had before. Is there any other questions? Fab. So I'm just going to close out on a couple of questions for you again, because, you know, I can't stop asking them. So if I can ask you to use the hand again at the bottom. So firstly, did you learn something interesting today? It's always a bit nerve-wracking when you don't quite get full hands straight away, but thanks everyone. My next question, and I will make this the final one, is there an idea we've talked about today that you really want to go and implement after this session? Amazing. Well, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back after this, because it sounds like you guys got a lot from this session. As we mentioned, we'll be sending around the recording so you can refer back to this. We also have a blog post that is about to be launched very soon. I just need to dot my I's and cross my T's. So you'll have all of these good examples. We'll also send you the value track element from the Google documentation for if you want to do anything more advanced with Google Ads. And then I guess my takeaway is just to keep in touch with us. As I mentioned, we've got to do some, I guess, some mirroring in terms of fresh relevance and what your campaigns have got. So if you want any sort of help with that, or can I do it this way, then please do just reach out, and we're more than happy to work through that with you.